Hello there, welcome again to Fringe Festival Support. Not Fringe Festival Support this year, of course, because there ain't no Fringe. But there is still a Fringe out there. There are comedians all over the place going through the lockdown, the same as all of us. And joining me today is Alex Kealy. How you doing, Alex?
I'm very well, thanks. Hi, do we wave? I'm waving.
You can wave.
Feels more real. It feels real if I wave.
I always worry because it's always the hand on screen that I don't expect. So I'll raise, no, that one there. I tried to introduce someone last time by pointing to them there and then realized that actually they were going to be on that side on the recording. Because, you know, Zoom, it's not like we've had 6 months practice to work out how this thing works.
No, it really feels like we've underestimated quite how difficult it is to be a weatherman. I feel like it's actually a lot harder. Like I would be constantly going, and Berkshire is going to be rainy and just gesticulating at, I guess, the Netherlands or something.
Yeah, Wales.
Yeah.
So how have things been for you? You've been locked down since March. Comedy ended last time we left was in late February, I think. But you've started to come back.
Yeah, a little bit. So I had an outdoor gig in early August, and then I had an indoor gig the other day, like late August, and those were both really fun. And the August gig was after 5 months of not performing. It was just really the weirdest sensation going on stage, because it was like, oh, I've forgotten how to do this. Do I still know how to do this? And it was great. But it was just like the adrenaline was like almost like doing your first ever gig. I don't know. It was just so weird. But yeah, so it was really fun, and just made me realize how much I love comedy.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have been sort of angsty to get back. Have you done any like online stuff? You've done any of these live online gigs or?
So I've done a few, not loads. I've done like 3 or 4, and I think my thing on it was like that a lot of them are run actually quite well. But I think I was in the middle of like, I'm not gonna. If those opportunities come my way, I'll be like yes, but I haven't been like bothered enough to chase them, particularly myself. I'm not. So I've done the Dulwich Hamlet Comedy Club had a really good one early on, and then I did Access Malarkey's one, and those were both run really well and fun. But generally, I was like, my view on the online gigs, at least emotionally, was like, oh great, the online Zoom gigs give you all of the genuine anxiety of being about to perform and none of the catharsis of having achieved it. So that was my view. I don't know. Yeah. So it just felt like some of the negatives and not the like adrenaline rush of it going well.
I guess the tricky thing as well is that some people's act sort of naturally fits an online, but others kind of without an audience, without kind of talking back to people. I think there's been a bit of success with things like Twitch where there's a bit of like chat going on at the same time, and you kind of do feel like, at least you feel like there's someone watching. Otherwise it's just kind of you talking into a camera and you feel a bit odd.
Yeah. Well, you got people like, do you know Bilal?
Yes. Well,
yeah.
He's come up several times on this. So I usually ask the question, who has been doing well out of lockdown? Who's kind of really crushed it? And Bilal comes up a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's just, I mean, it's the answer. It's like one of those, it's very rare in an essay question to have just like, oh yeah, no, this is the one word answer. the one word answer is Bilal. So yeah, he smashed it. Yeah, and definitely other people have seem to have made Twitch work. It's not really, I guess, like, to be honest, we're probably about to crash into lockdown 2, Electric Boogaloo. So I'm, I'll have to become a Twitcher in like October, November. But I don't know if it's my natural. I don't know if it's my natural form. I'll have to work out what. I'm not enough of a gamer.
You want to be a shoutcaster. That's what they're called.
What's a shoutcaster?
It's basically a commentator, but for esports it needs to be a bit more extreme, so they call them shoutcasters.
What would be would my version be just getting BBC Parliament up on and just go, no, not like that. Come on, like is that what I'm supposed to be doing? I don't know.
Yeah, the Mumblecast. It's a bit more like goggle box, a sort of goggle box for sort of, you need to be a lot more animated, I think, to actually keep people engaged.
Right.
So, I mean, it is actually maybe what Parliament TV needs, to be honest.
Yeah. I think my shtick is already quite reserved and dry, so I don't know whether I am. I don't know. I'll pivot. But you get a lot of Limmy's. The clips I've seen of Limmy, a lot of the time it is like quite small little. A lot of the funniest stuff seems to be quite like measured facial winks and stuff like that are just as funny as. Yeah.
Parliament could use more facial winks, I imagine.
What, just like people, backbenchers in various parties kind of trying to like Morse code stuff about like how they're like really here under duress and they'd rather be on the other benches?
Yeah, that'd be good. I've said a couple of times that this conversation feels a lot like you should be holding up a newspaper, kind of just proving that you're out the other side of COVID. I was going to say, just because we've been talking about like current events, I should put into context for anybody watching in the future that we're currently in like early to mid-September, and literally yesterday they've started talking about not allowing gatherings more than 6 people. How that works in terms of comedy, pubs, churches, we don't really know at this point.
And obviously in your future, if you're watching in March 2021, of course, they brought in the not allowing a gathering of 1 person, which was very tricky and was interpreted as a kind of a very aggressive rule.
Yeah, let's go all time tunnel on this. I think that would be very useful. So you've done bits and bobs online, getting to do some live stuff. How have you coped in general? Like in terms of like, obviously this has been very taxing in terms of mental health, and financially, like basically comedians have not really been able to work really at all, unless you can monetize something online, which goodness only knows what sort of dark art that is. No one really knows how to do that yet, I don't think.
No, it's no. So I mean, I guess in the grand scheme of things, I'm quite lucky. So where we were before lockdown is, I would say I was like a semi-professional comedian in the sense that I earn about half my income from comedy and the other half from like sort of maths tutoring. And so that's sort of changed over previous. So I've been doing better at comedy that allowed me to cut down on tutoring, and I basically just ramped up the other way. And I've sort of so in a bizarre way, there've been chunks of this lot, particularly in August. It's the closest I've been to like a normie 9-to-5er in my entire life, because I've just had like a bunch of tutoring, and then because it's been unlocked a bit, and sort of pubs if you're outside and sort of socially distant, which I've been doing somewhat, it just felt very weird being like, I mean, a pandemic's happening, and yet I would argue my current pattern of life is significantly more normal than all of the patterns of life that I've had for the past 8 years trying to make it as a comedian. So this month has been actually quite nice mental health wise, and it's been really good to connect with a few friends that I've just, all those friendships that lie dead behind you in the road when you're trying to make it as a comedian and you've only got 1 night a week free. So that's been really nice to sort of try and give CPR to those friendships. But yeah, June and July, I'd say like March, April, I don't know, what everyone's mental health was. I'd say March, April, May, it was absolute roller coaster of like 4 or 5 days a week. I would say I was like, I had like a bit of tutoring work, not as much as I like, but I had like some stuff that allowed me to feel like vaguely busy. And I'd be like, oh, this is amazing. I can just do this indefinitely. This isn't great, but I can do this. And then like every time I thought I was in that permanent state, 1 in every 5 days, I'd be like, oh, I'm like not exaggerating to say that I'm sort of quite very depressed, if not more. Yeah. And so just like, and it was just like amazing to just be like, every time I thought I'd conquered that emotion for 5 days. And at the end of that sort of 5 to 7 days, it'd be another day being like, oh, you literally almost have to accept that this is actually a situation, and it is quite a reasonable response to feel extremely depressed about the situation. And you just have to not beat yourself up if you're depressed that day, and try and find whatever strategies to sort of get you through that particular period. And then June and July were just a lot more boring level of almost constant low energy. Like June and July were bad, but neither the highs nor quite the extreme lows of the first 3 months. But then the opening up in August, I think, is just being able to see people a bit. more has been nice.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been like a seesaw in terms of like, you have days where you're like, it's really good. I've got to create a load of stuff. I'm gonna write shows, and I'm gonna have everything ready so that when this all comes back, I'm gonna have like so much content. And then the next day you're like, but what if it never comes back? And I've just wasted all of my time doing all of this stuff, when I should have been concentrating on my push-ups and my banana bread.
Hey, I've done far more banana bread, not far more push-ups. I've done a few push-ups, but I've definitely done more banana bread and 5Ks than I've done any kind of like creative. So I've done such little creative work over the period. Like I've come up with some routines and stuff, but I just know that I like need an audience, and like I just think in a weird way, I think there's something zen about it, that if you're looking purely at stand up and people talk about like, oh, well, I can use this lockdown to write a show, I just sort of don't believe that you can. Like I just think it is like a live art form. And like, okay, so some people who are in like great mental health spaces during this time somehow, or like people who like thrive in solitude and can like shank out a bunch of jokes during that time, great. I just don't think, if we're looking at like Edinburgh cycles or whatever, say next Edinburgh happening, and say that one of the vaccines, not the one that was just basically binned again in holding up the newspaper for future readers as I beg for my cactus to let me go. If somehow comedy is much more back to normal, I think it's about to not go back to normal. I think it's about to get locked down again. But if in February, March, they're back to normal, and then we had like a 5-month build up towards Edinburgh, I don't think someone that written 100 ideas for routines would be in a much better position than someone who hadn't written any. Because I just think building a show is like, I think building a stand-up show, and it's not true for some people, I can think of people who write very meticulous shows that don't need an audience to prepare them. But I think it is mostly just throwing shit at test audiences, seeing what works, coming with ideas. And as long as you're coming up with like a new-ish idea a day, or when the gigs are back on and when like life is more stimulating anyway, you're going to be in just as good. Good shows have been written in good. If you had 20 preview shows in 2 months just before Edinburgh, you could basically, if you worked hard, write a show. So I just don't like, it's nice to create stuff, but I almost think the stand up, it's like what for? Like it's just like it's a discipline that's really about a live audience. And so if you don't have them to test at that time, you don't know that your joke's going to be great until you don't know which way to go. So I wouldn't like, I've come up with a few things, and like at the 2 gigs I've done, I've like tried out some new stuff, and that's worked, and that's felt great, because I've gone like, oh, I know that I've still got the ability to come up with new material and it can work. But equally, I just wouldn't. It's I guess it's just about survival more than, I don't know. People underrate how important survival is during a pandemic. Being like, have you written a King Lear? I'm like, are you alive? Are you alive in a pandemic? Are you alive? Good, well done. You've achieved a really strong goal. King Lear is a huge stretch goal afterwards, I think.
The King Lear example comes up a lot. Is it true? I've not looked into it. Is it? So the theory is that Shakespeare wrote King Lear in the bubonic plague, is like during a lockdown when all the oldie schools were out.
Also, just like if it was Shakespeare's, I feel like particularly when you're asking people to pivot, because I think I don't think a lot of authors. I think there are some authors that would have been like, great, pandemic. This is actually, I'm fine, great. Stand-ups, no, we need that live audience. And if you're like saying to stand-ups, hey, you can pivot to this thing, it's like, cool, they're different forms. It's actually very difficult to try. Everyone's like, just write this thing. It's like, no, like a lot of stand-up, if you do stand-up, which is like opinion-based routines, that you have a concept and you go through that concept and then create jokes that are about you saying those jokes, that isn't immediately translatable to like, even to a sitcom. That's like a big change, let alone like a book or something. And so it's just like, if Shakespeare's first play were King Lear, I'd be like, this is interesting. Maybe I should get off. But it's just like, oh, the already greatest playwright of all time wrote another play during lockdown. And King Lear is one of his best, but it's not necessarily the best. And I can definitely think of a few others that were as good or better. So it's not even like he wrote his best play. Like, it's just like, it's such a like, what's the point in this example? Like, I don't.
Yeah. I do a lot of work in video games, and the example we use there a lot is Angry Birds. Like, people think that was this sort of amazing, like, came from nowhere, suddenly this hugely famous thing. It was like I think it was their 49th game. Rovio had made like 49 games before that. Then they made Angry Birds, and it just clicked. But the 49 previous ones were not particularly there. Is Angry Birds the King Lear of video games?
Why don't does the Angry Bird have 3 chicklings that that are varying levels of like moral fortitude, or I don't know?
3 pigs with weird names. Actually, you get 3 stars, don't you? You get 1 to 3 stars, so one for each daughter.
Great.
So I mean, it's refreshing to hear you say, basically admit that your 4 previous Edinburgh shows have all been work in progress, and spaghetti at a wall sort of approach. This was going to be the year as well, wasn't it? This was going to be the year, Alex.
I know. Has anyone, what I think would be refreshing, has anyone at any of these previous shows gone, do you know what? I'm so lucky because this was absolutely going to be not my year. And it's so good that we took this. Because I kind of almost, I was excited about the show that I was going to build, but it wasn't that far in. And I'd written funny material, but not on the topic. I wanted my show to be about Silicon Valley, basically, and kind of tech capitalism. But I had like 3 jokes on that. I had like another funny 20 minutes about breakups, and boy, was I going to crowbar that in. But I don't know, 4 years on the trot, it would have been the 5th year on the trot. Probably quite good to not, even if you've actually not got more time the next time the kind of 5th show comes along, if you've had a year off, if comedy clubs haven't been open, I still think you're mentally recharging and growing, maybe like time to zoom out. But yeah, I would hey, Edinburgh used to be a work in progress month almost, right? Before it became hyper professionalized and pressure cookery, it used to be that people would build shows. I mean, I would say that my show is usually only finished. I would say there's still a good deal of improvement that happens in the first 7 days when I'm up there. Yeah. And I'm only like, I would say, I hope it always improves in the month, obviously, but I would say that there's a big changes usually. I would say from day 1 to day 7, there are some big changes usually, and it usually gets a lot better, I think. Which is annoying if you have reviewers in days 2 through 6. Sure.
Oh, that's when they come. That's sure. Absolutely when they'll come.
I know, but it's such sod's law, because it'll be like people with like tight shows be like, I just want the reviewers in early so I'd get them and then get the buzz going with me. Be like, can they come on day 8 and then just pick up some 4s rather than some like very, very nice 3s? Very nice.
I want to get those really average 3-star reviews in the first couple of days so that people know like that they can come or not. Yeah. If they're free, it might be worth it.
Well, exactly. There's something almost aggressive. There's almost something aggressively imposing on an audience, a prospective audience member, to thrust a 4 in their face on a flyer, being like, you must come. Whereas 3 is like, hey, if you feel comfortable coming.
I mean, the wonderful thing about Edinburgh is that you're doing it for like essentially a month. It's like 3.5, 4 weeks. It's always nice to get that early review that says this is not worth your time and effort, so that you can spend the next 3 weeks really plugging through that and slapping on a fake smile.
Oh my god, yeah, the most brutal. The couple of like mean 2 stars I've had have always been like at least midway through the month on a bad night, where like I've like been able to like clutch at other emotional life rafts. But like I think like a nasty 2 or something coming out of the bat. That's like when you're like, hey, maybe the pandemic isn't so bad, right? Because like shielded from that kind of emotional scrutiny.
I mean, we felt a little bit guilty because our show last year did quite well, and actually got picked up for a run in America in June. So we were actually thinking, with that, like for a month of June, are we actually going to have time to get anything ready? And we were kind of thinking, for the first time in, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, we may not go to Edinburgh this year. So we were kind of guilty when they cancelled it, because it was like, well, kind of, we weren't really probably going to go anyway. This was going to be our year off. So we've been given a sort of a free pass almost. I'm sorry, obviously in the back of your mind, you're like, this would have been the year. This fallow year was the year that we would have done a show that would have won all the awards. Would have done it all this year.
Yeah. No, no, I'm pretty sure this wasn't my year, and I've had a lucky reprieve where I can reboot and then make 2021/2022 if we're feeling particularly grim. Hey, look, maybe the Russian vaccine will be amazing, and actually, actually, we'll all have the Russian vaccine probably.
Yeah, if you want to let Alex know that this wasn't going to be his year, please feel free to comment below the video. Love to get that feedback. Love some reassurance.
Yeah, I miss Edinburgh. I need people giving their unsolicited opinions. My ego's had over a year since unsolicited opinions, so please.
Yeah, it's always nice because you can, in Edinburgh, you're leaving the venue into the audience. Like no matter where you're playing, you're probably, there's no back door to get kind of out safely. So you do get that sort of, oh, if I could just bend your ear for a minute, here's the bits I really didn't like. Here's the stuff I thought was really, really average. That's always nice. You can't really get that on Zoom. Like you can't really wait until afterwards.
I think as soon as you've got a contact page on your website, that's it. That's the electronic bending of ear at any point.
Yeah, well, Twitter's been great for that as well, hasn't it? I mean, that's just instant feedback. I didn't even like your tweet. I'm not going to come and see your show.
Yeah, well, exactly. Each time I tweet, I know by implication thousands of people chose not to like that tweet. So every tweet is a massive failure every time.
Yeah. I do like the fact that you can see how many times you've tweeted and how disappointing that is that like not one of those has gone anywhere. I got 50 likes on that back in 2014. Remember that? That was an average joke that got a lot of likes. Got a couple of retweets as well. Are you optimistic Edinburgh will come back next year?
I mean, genuinely, that AstraZeneca news has definitely like reduced my optimism on that by certainly a few percentage points.
I think that's the common held belief, isn't it? That until we have a vaccine, that that in a similar way to flu, this is not going to be. We're just going to have to sort of live with it and go along with it. I mean, to put it into context again, today there's lots of news about Andrew Lloyd Webber has been talking. He's done a thing in Parliament, not in Parliament, but in the meetings, talking about how it's just not plausible. The Royal Albert Hall are having terrible problems.
It's good of Andrew Lloyd Webber to come to Parliament for something other than cutting benefits. But but yes, I do obviously agree with him on reopening the arts. If possible, I guess like Edinburgh is like almost unique. I just think like Edinburgh is literally probably the worst event in the world in a pandemic, right? Like just like logistically, if you're talking about the tessellation of just audiences, that you've just got these whirring cogs of like changing a room 7 times, 8 times a day more. And then so I don't think Edinburgh as we knew it can come back until like a vaccine. I think like some sort of Edinburgh will happen next year, because I think where we sort of could be, if the government had been a bit better on a few things, where we are or could be is that like, I do think theatre is not a million miles away. So I think like, I think it is more likely I'll do a tour next year than it is that Edinburgh will happen. Like that I'll go to Edinburgh. Like I think there's a good chance that I'll just tour in the autumn without doing Edinburgh.
Big theatres, like big-ish theatres, should be okay. I mean, I spoke to a theatre last week that's like 120 seats, and they reckoned that to actually implement the social distancing, just the way that it's set up, I think they would be down to like 27. But maybe with like
maybe I'm not touring, or maybe I'm
going to have to be a big theatre anyway. So you think about some of those Edinburgh venues, and to actually socially distance people in the caves, or some of those smaller venues that are very sort of narrow. You'd barely be able to get like 5 people in, which is for some people one of their record attendances. But but
do we have to think outside the box more for like spreading out how we use those spaces? So like a bit more of like lunchtime theatre shows, a bit more like matinee, like trying to do for like stand-ups, instead of trying to drag out into two halves or whatever, just do the show. If I'm doing my hour, instead of trying to do, instead of having a support act or intervals, just do your hour and then just do it twice in the evening. Just do it like once at 7 and once at 9. And then, I don't know, but I suppose theatre do that a bit anyway and try and have double bills. So it's not necessarily, but yeah, I just think that we could be at a stage where the virus is low enough prevalence that you could have only like not as extreme social distancing as that, but something like Edinburgh obviously still couldn't happen because just the inherent like R rate of like what it is to be in Edinburgh must be like absurd. It must be like,
yeah, I mean, is it, I think 3 million visitors, I think they talk about all of them in the Royal Mile doing sixth form musicals, but yeah, it's a huge concentration of people, not just the performers and like in the actual spaces, but in the streets of Edinburgh. It's like, you know, you can barely move a lot of times. You think about particularly like around the bigger venue, you know, how you would the Pleasance Courtyard with like 2 very small entrances in and out. You know, how would you move people around that space and maintain any sort of proper kind of distance?
yeah. So I still think probably if the theatre stuff is happening, I think Edinburgh will happen, but I just think it will just be like completely unlike what it's been before. And I don't really think for necessarily the better, in the sense that it will just, obviously all of it will just privilege acts that are, which is fine, you know, great acts, whatever. But I just mean like, it's not, all the changes would need to happen are not a story where like an underdoggy like John Kearns at like a free fringe venue wins best newcomer and then comes back and wins best show next year. Like it's going to be venues with like greater logistical capacity, and I think there'll be fewer shows, and it'll be shows from like bigger names basically. And you're already seeing it where like a lot of big names who want stage time are now like, you know, the comedy food web has reduced so much that even the lions are like, can we have this vole? I'm a lion and I now eat vole because there's no antelope anymore. So you know, you get your massive comedians doing like 50 quid spots at like to get some new material done. And so like that ecology I think will happen in Edinburgh as well, that everyone, you know, so I'm not, yeah. So unless there is a vaccine, I think Edinburgh will be either not happen, or like it will happen, but it will be smaller and more focused on like already established acts, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Are you into that?
I think I would have had to have at least 2. This was my years to be benefiting from that. I had I had a good Edinburgh last year. I've you know, it's been going well over the past 18 months. I'm very happy with how comedy's been going, and not the last 6 months, but the 18 months before that. But you know, no, I'm not. I'm someone more on the like up and coming side of things than the like, you know, I'm not going to be featured in broadsheet roundups before the Fringe starts. Maybe in future, but
unless you do some sort of horrible crime.
Horrible crime, yeah, or I don't know, or so, yeah, I think or do a thematic show, which is, you know, do something like I walked 1,000 miles a day for a year and I died. Here's my story.
There is that risk that next year will just be a series of shows of like what I did in lockdown.
Sure.
How much money I raised for the NHS. One of those, because I mean, we were joking in like March, you know, February, March, before it was a thing. You know, we were joking that there'd be loads of like coronavirus musicals and it would all be horrible. But now it's going to be like hard luck stories of lockdown.
Yeah, and it's like, I suppose there's like a happy medium where like, so if I were doing I do mostly political shows, I wouldn't be able to not talk about it. And I think there are loads of really interesting, I think rather than just talking about the particular geography of what happened, I think there's like really interesting things that it says about how humans and politics work. There are loads of stuff I think that like loads of things this government have done have just been like really just route one, like ideological errors where like they couldn't possibly, you know, we should have thrown another £400 million at giving everyone in the country, if you test positive coronavirus, you have to stay home, but you get paid 90 quid a day to do so. We've spent tens of billions of pounds on this. If you tot it up, how many people probably get coronavirus over 6 months, and what that would cost to give everyone like 100 quid a day to make sure they stay at home. And then you can be super draconian if they don't, because you can be like, well, we gave you a good wage to do so. And then you can go super hard if anyone violates quarantine, therefore. It costs like £300 million to do that. That's less than Out to help out. And that's far less than any of the furlough stuff. And we could have, that would just really have brought the art, like you would have kept it. There's no financial carrot to make people who are on 0-hour contracts, who have to go out to work, because the entire like 21st century economy is innovation by like Deliveroo and Airbnb innovating away your unemployment and like pension benefits and healthcare benefits away, like, with this very exciting innovation of stripping workers' rights away. And so all of that feeds into something like, so the pandemic is a really good example of just like how, integral workers' rights are to like a functioning society. So like that's, I think, interesting and related. But I don't want a whole show about. Because everyone shouldn't. If everyone does shows about like, I had this weird experience. It's like we all had this weird experience. Like we all. Yeah. So you have to add stuff onto that.
Yeah, I mean that's what it's been quite cathartic doing these chats, because like I think for a little while you tend to suddenly forget that everybody's out there doing the same thing. Everybody's trapped in their homes. I mean, just for balance, Airbnb and Deliveroo, they've created 3 times the jobs. It's just you have to now work 3 jobs to actually earn what you would have done when there was only 1 job. So it's not all bad. Those numbers look good.
It'd be very funny with Airbnb as well to see, because you're already starting to see on like the London rental market and lots of other places now that there's less tourism, all these extra flats are popping up onto the usual rental property market, and they've got lots of folded towels on the beds. We all fold our towels on the beds, and it's a normal rental. It's not someone that realizes they can't gouge on Airbnb anymore and they've had to shove it onto.
Alex, have you been folding your towels on your bed during lockdown? I demand answers.
I get banana bread to rise, and so I'm folding towels. That's my new thing.
I'm mostly worried about my hair. I decided to cut all my hair. I had very long hair, and I cut it all off, just because don't have to do anything. No going public. This is obviously before we decided to do like Zoom chats with people. But it seems to be growing back, but it's just like growing straight upwards. I'm having to like do a lot of like managing it, a lot of pushing down in order to stop it.
Too much baking powder in is what you think?
Could be. Do you remember Fido Dido, the 7-Up character, like many moons ago?
No. What's that?
Like a kind of straight up buzz cut. It's like a Vanilla Ice style sort of like Guile from Street Fighter. I think that's where I'm going. It's just going to go straight up.
Love it.
Well, it's been lovely talking to you. I'm sure you've got lots of things to be getting on with.
What have I got? I'm doing a drive-in gig in Staffordshire later. That'll be fun.
Cool.
I've never done one. I'm looking forward to having audience reaction, but it being honk based.
Yeah.
And then getting to work out whether that's a honk heckle or a honk yas, and I don't, so we'll see.
Flashing lights as well, isn't it? I think they get people to flash their lights.
Yeah,
I did wonder about that. Like, if you do a really, really good gig, it's just like everyone's battery's dead by the end of it, and no one goes home.
Well, exactly. Also, like, I don't think we've thought fully about, like, I suppose it's not quite at the rate, but it's not a good time to be an epileptic comedian. If you're epileptic as a comedian, it's a good time to not be funny, I think, on that basis.
Same as the honk. How do you know it's not like a slow hand clap style flash?
Well, because I only have slow hand claps when I rush last minute to the airport to persuade my girlfriend to stay, and then the cars can slow honk me. So yeah.
Lovely to talk to you, man.
Lovely to talk to you.
Stay safe. Stay upbeat. We'll all come through this thing in some fashion. Nice to chat to you. Take care.
Thanks.